Most of us were taught to avoid fighting in relationships at all costs. But as it turns out, the only way to have a truly great relationship is to lean into the tension when it arises. In this video, Joe Hudson, the co-founder of The Art of Accomplishment, shares everything he has learned about how to have great fights in a relationship. All you need to do is watch, apply the lessons that resonate, and see how your relationships transform.
I remember this time with my wife where we had gone through this phase of fighting all the time. I mean, our fights were so horrific, and we had learned that the fights were just basically verbal abuse, that we were abusing each other. And so we had stopped fighting, and we started tracking our relationship by how often we fought, right? So it was like we were doing good if we weren't fighting as much, and we were doing worse if we were fighting more. And nowadays that idea is ludicrous to us, right? And it's not we don't judge it by how much we fight. We judge it by how we fight. That's how we're judging our relationship. So we have been in situations, recently this happened, we were preparing for a retreat. We were both tired. We're going into this thing that's just it's a super intense thing. The retreats that we do, we work from 7:30 in the morning until 10:30 at night, 7 days in a row. And so it's definitely where we're going to be most frayed. And so we have this fight, and we do it wherever we want to do it. We don't hide our fights. We just sort of yeah, this is our fight, so we're having our fight, and we're doing it, and we're doing it in front of the folks that we are facilitating with, right? And the end of it, it was this 3 or 4 minute fight. And the end of it, I was it's really hard to fight with you, and I'm glad we resolved that. I love you. And the two people who were there were that was a fight? They just they didn't even know it was a fight. But for us, it was a fight, and it was an important fight. And so the reason that we don't judge it by how often we fight anymore is because fighting is really, really important. And the reason that it's important is because it's all life requires tension. If I'm going to breathe, my lungs have to have tension. If a cell's going to exist, it has to have tension. So as we grow, as we live, as we're alive, as we change as people, there's going to be tension. And the more transformation that we have in our life, the more tension there's going to be there. And so we need to address that tension for us to be vital and alive and healthy. There's this great metaphor, and I think there's a guy who wrote The Black Swan. And he has this idea that basically financial markets need to have tension on a regular basis for them to be healthy. And so he says big collapses in the market happen because little collapses aren't allowed to happen because of monetary policy. As that sounds weird, but an easier way to think about it is we're healthy physically because we physically give ourselves tension through exercise. And if we don't, then we're unhealthy and the falls are really, really big. So any kind of system requires kind of a regular tension to stay healthy. And it's the same in a marriage or in a relationship. There's some tension that's really required. The question is, how do you handle that tension? And that's the really important part. But if you judge your relationship by how many fights you have, well, then you have the wrong metric for a healthy relationship. It's how you fight. Are you fighting with love? Are you fighting with an open heart? Are you fighting with respect? Or have you completely lost your nervous system? Are you completely out of control? Are you being abusive? Are you being mean? Have you lost yourself? Are you being who you want to be in that fight? So some people might not even call it a fight, but I'm going to call it a fight here because it's just so important that we have that friction in a relationship. So the avoidance of the friction is an amazingly detrimental thing to a relationship because it basically kills it. It stagnates it. And so having that friction is just critical. It's just how you have it that's important. So there was this couple that I was working with at this one point. Both of them, one was a high-powered lawyer, one was a venture capitalist. The marriage was just they would fight over the coffee maker, the grounds being left at the espresso machine. You know what I'm saying? It was this was their life. And they had clearly loved each other at one point, and their relationship was clearly hot at one point, and now the sex was dead. And it was all about the interactions of the kids and the administration of life. And there was no intimacy, there was no connection, there was no storytelling, that the whole thing had just fallen apart. And they were both incredibly scared to just tell each other their truths because, and this happens in almost all the relationships, probably happens in yours, is that one person is scared to tell their truth because the other person's going to be too fragile. It's like it's going to hurt them. It's going to break them. They're going to be depressed for even longer or something like that. And the other one isn't scared to tell the truth because of the anger. Oh, they're going to get angry at me. They're going to yell at me. They're going to be upset. Or they're going to remove their love. And then I'm going to be chasing them for their love. And so I'm just not going to say the thing that's important to me. I'm just not going to say my truth. And so they're both not showing up in this case, they both weren't showing up in the relationship. And so they committed to telling each other their truth, which means that there was going to be conflict. It means that the fighting had to happen, but the fighting had to happen differently. And so when they committed to both, one, having the fights in a respectful manner, and two, speaking their truth even when the other person might be hurt, it was 6 months, maybe 8 months, and their whole relationship had changed. And this is an incredibly common story in the work that I do. It's that you have to speak your truth in a relationship despite what it might do to somebody else. Despite the idea that, oh, I'm not being compassionate, even though you are. It's just maybe not nice, or it's not convenient, or it's just an emotional experience that you don't want to have in the moment. But it's deeply compassionate because showing up for a person and saying, this is where I'm at, so that they know where they're at, that is compassion. If you can do it with an open heart, if you can do it lovingly. And the trick there is just to do that consistently all the time. It doesn't have to be like, here's my truth right now, I have to tell it. Yeah, it can be like, oh, I can wait until, they're rested. It can be a Saturday. It doesn't have to be urgent. And it doesn't have to be mean. As a matter of fact, it should always be done with an open heart. But the most important thing to get for a relationship from being dead, dormant, to moving in a place where there's love and you want to be with each other again, and you're not feeling disempowered, you're not feeling like you're fucking getting ripped apart every time you come home. It's not like, oh shit, I got to go home again. If you want to change that relationship, the most important step is speaking your truth and doing it with respect. One of the things that people get caught up in fights is that they just feel like they're completely out of control. They're like, what the hell? I've completely lost myself. I don't know what I'm doing. And we've all felt this. We've all been in a situation where it literally feels like somebody animated us, stuck their hand up us and made us like a puppet. And it wasn't who we are. It wasn't who we wanted to be. The important thing to know about that is that's trauma. So think about it this way. Someone's got PTSD, some known kind of trauma. And they were in a war in Iraq, and there was big bombs going off. And now they're in Cleveland, Ohio, and a car backfires, and they think they're back in Fallujah. The way trauma works is it brings you back to a place where you aren't right now. It brings you back to the place where the trauma happened and asks you to relive that trauma. The whole fight, the whole purpose of the whole thing is so that you can actually process the emotions that you couldn't process at the time of the trauma. But what occurs instead is we go, oh my God, we lost it, we blah, 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 blah. We don't feel anything. We have the same reaction we did when we had the trauma the first time. And so this is a big capital T trauma, PTSD, war, Fallujah. But there's other traumas like, every time I was scared, my mom was like, be strong. So I never actually got nurtured in my fear. And so fear became the enemy. That's a different kind of trauma. And now when I'm scared, fear's the enemy. I won't feel that. I won't feel it in my partner. My partner's scared. I'm trying to control them so that they don't feel fear. So I don't feel it because I don't want to feel it. And that's a different kind of trauma. And I'm back to my mom saying, hey, you have to be strong. You're not allowed to have fear. But what the trauma is asking of me to heal is to actually feel that fear that I didn't get to feel when I was a kid. And so that's how the nervous system just gets hot wired, right? So you're just like, and now off you go. And now there's a whole bunch of very cool tricks on keeping your nervous system calm. The easiest one is just breathe. You can do box breath. You can look that up. It's really easy. You can just do 6-6 breath is one of my favorites. Just slow down your breath, be conscious, and that can like totally calm your nervous system. You can put your hands on your body, feel your body. That can completely calm your nervous system. But the idea is when that's happening, that's your opportunity. The opportunity is calm your nervous system so you can be back in yourself and then feel the thing that you didn't get to feel. And hopefully you've gotten far enough with your partner where you can have that kind of agreement. Like, oh, I'm in my trauma. I need to feel some shit. Oh, cool. And that's an amazing thing. Like where Tara and I got to a point in our fights where it was like, oh, I recognize I'm not here right now. I'm in my trauma. I need to feel my stuff. Amazing thing happened. The fight just ended. The fight was like, oh, this is why we're having the fight. The fight is for you to heal this trauma. Great. You're in it. You see it. I'm right here for you. And she would just come to me and just be with me while I felt it. And I would just come to her and I'd just be with her while she felt it. And it was just this, every one of our fights became a way to relieve the trauma that put us in the place to have the fight for the first time. And I remember this story. I love this story. So my friend was in this relationship. It was like, he'd never been in a relationship before that was long. Like he was like one of those like 1 month sleep with everybody, but he found this relationship and he was really into her and she broke his heart and crushed him. And we were sitting there talking about it and he's like, what do I do? And I'm like, you cry, you fucking grieve. You like, and it's going to, at the beginning, it's going to be about the woman, but at the end, you don't know what it's going to be about. You're just going to cry. And so he was doing this great river restoration project and he had to drive 5 hours every week, one way and 5 hours back to get to the river. And he would cry the whole way there and we'd cry and we would talk like every other week. And he'd be like, my God, the sounds that are coming out of me, what the fuck? And, week 1 and 2 he was crying over the loss, but then in week 3, 4, 5, he was crying over what got him there, like the upbringing, the parents, the way he was raised, his ideas of love, and he just like kept on grieving. He grieved so much stuff. And before this happened, he was kind of overweight. His business wasn't doing well. He was drinking too much. And at the end of this like 4 or 5 months of grieving, he was like in shape. And he wasn't dating, but he was in shape. His business was thriving and he wasn't drinking. And it was an amazing switch just because he had felt all that trauma all the way through. And so you can do that by breaking up, but you can also do that in the relationship. And it's really cool in a relationship because part of the trauma that we feel is that we were all alone in it. And if you can use your relationship and each one of those fights to find where your trauma is and then be supported in it so that you can actually realize, oh, I'm not alone. I'm allowed to feel this stuff. That is when relationships like so much transformation so quickly. So just like my friend who went from, overweight, bad business, drinking too much, like that happens in a relationship. That's what happens in a marriage. And it's fucking amazing. So there's this guy that I was coaching. He was, like a incredibly successful human being. He had built like a multiple $billion-dollar company. And when it came to his marriage, he just didn't believe that he could, change the marriage. And I said to him, like, oh, so what is it that makes you think that you could like, oh, I can build a $10 billion, $8 billion company, but you can't like fix a relationship. Like how does that mindset get in there? And he clearly didn't have an answer for it, but it allowed him to see like, oh, wait, this is ridiculous. The fact that I don't think that I can shift or change this relationship. And it's the most critical thing if you're going to start working on the relationship is to actually have belief and faith that there's change that's possible. If you don't, then you'll be undermining yourself the whole time. Just yesterday, I was hanging out, watching my daughter's volleyball game. And I watched, like, they were ahead and then they were behind. And I watched the entire team, their shoulders slumped. They're like, oh, we're not going to be able to do this. And they just got worse and worse and worse and worse. They didn't remember that they were at one point, like, going in the right direction. And all they did. And the father next to me is like, they're never going to win like that. And you know it, like if you've watched sports, you've seen this, and you see where the mindset changes. It doesn't, like, you just know that there's loss on the horizon. And so it's the same thing in a relationship. And so the thing about a relationship that's important, or about trying to do anything, is the way that the brain works is that we have something, gosh, I think it's like the habenula, and it's basically in all vertebrae, and it prevents us from failing over and over and over again. So let's say you're a bear and you fought for rights to like mate with another bear and you lost. You don't want to like go and get your butt kicked again and again and again. Or if you keep on going to this one part of this forest and you eat this mushroom and you get sick, you don't want to do it again and again. It's that part of your brain. And it's the thing that makes us, like, when we're trying to diet and then we like have that piece of chocolate cake, we're like, fuck it, I failed. And then like you just eat chocolate cake every day. That's the part of the brain. And so you need to know that going into the relationship. And instead of having it like, I'm going to try this, and if it doesn't work, then it's over, you need to think about it as like, oh, here are the 10, 20 experiments that I'm going to do working with the relationship. And it's much better if it's together, right? Like if both people are saying, hey, let's work on this relationship, and that's what we want to do, then great. Then you both have it. You both have the iterations, so that you're never failing. You're just trying the next thing. That's going to work for you. If you're in a situation where you're like, oh, my boyfriend or girlfriend doesn't want to work on the relationship with me, like that's the conversation you have to have. Like if they don't want to work on making a better relationship and you want a better relationship, it might not be a match. Like that conversation has got to be had, because working on a relationship on your own is actually an incredibly effective, important thing to do as far as your own personal growth, but it's not going to make the relationship better unless both people want a better relationship. Meaning that you can work on how you want to be with them, how you want to listen, how you want to fight, all the things that you can do. And then the next relationship you're going to be in, you're going to be better at that next relationship. But what's not going to happen is, like, if one person's like resistant to having a better relationship, you can't change another human being that way. Like they have to want it. You can, try for a while, say, this is how I want to show up, and they might be inspired and join you. But eventually, like, you have to let them be them and you be you. And if there's not that, hey, let's work on this relationship together, then you've got to make a choice. Do I want to stay in a relationship that is like this because they don't want to make it any better? They don't want to iterate. They don't want to try. So as a matter of fact, when I say to people, they're like, oh, should I get married to a person? One of the things that I'll ask is like, are you both willing to work and change, yourselves and the relationship so that it gets better and better and better? Because if you don't have that agreement up front, the chances of success are not great. So the most important thing is that you think you can do it, and that the two of you are in agreement about how to move forward and the experiments, and setting up those experiments in advance so that you can't fail. So it's just, we've tried that didn't work for us because we're these kinds of two people, so we're going to try this other thing. And then you go through this list of experiments. And I guarantee you, by the time the list of experiments is done, you will absolutely be in a different place than when it started. They don't have to work even. But you will have learned about yourself. You will have learned about each other. You will learn things where you can create new experiments that will work. And it's just like one over the other. And if you're really interested in experiments, we have a whole bunch of stuff on experiments that you can like figure out how to do great experiments. And there's a podcast and stuff you can listen to. There was a time in our relationship, Tara and I, where I very much thought that I was superior. If you feel like you're better than somebody when you're fighting with them, it makes it incredibly hard for that fight to be a constructive, productive fight. I found out that this is actually really, really common when I started coaching in relationships. And it's not just common, there's a very particular pattern that it's usually common with. So typically in relationships, one person is more intellectual and one person is more emotional, right? So you probably know which one you are, like by the look on your face, right? And so the person who's intellectual often feels like they're right more of the time. And the person who's emotional often feels like they're wrong more of the time. This is the dynamic. Now, the reason that people feel like they're right, that they need to feel superior and they can judge other people, is because there's emotions that they don't want to feel. whenever we're judging anybody, including ourselves, it's because we don't want to feel a certain emotion. And so that makes the fight detrimental, because basically we're trying to control the other person so that we don't have to feel a certain emotion, right? And so controlling somebody else doesn't make fights productive. So the dynamic is one person's emotional, one person's more logical. The logical person feels like they're right more of the time. The emotional person often feels like they're wrong, but there's a little part of them that's like, no, I'm not. Like, that's also, yeah, see? And so that's like the typical dynamic. And then people will agree on this relationship dynamic for an extended period of time, sometimes a whole marriage. They're the smart one, they're the right one, I'm the emotional one. But the reason that we're like attracted to one another is because we're there to learn. I learned really about my emotions through being with Tara, and that was one of the biggest blessings of our relationship. And for Tara, there was a learning of how to be in her emotions and have that emotional fluidity without being completely controlled by them and feel taken away by them. And that was the learning, one of the big learnings for her in the relationship. And so we're often attracted to that person because that's the thing that we're there to learn. But if we're fighting and we're thinking, oh, we're better than the other person, what that's actually doing is we're not feeling an emotion, which means we're trying to control the other person not to feel emotion, trying to control somebody. Well, that doesn't make for a good fight. Nobody wants to be controlled. Nobody's like, hey, could you control me like in a way that I'm not okay with? There's obviously, there's a whole bunch of BDSM stuff that it says, hey, yeah, control is, but we don't want to be controlled in a way that we're actually going against our will. We want to have maybe some play there, but it's not something that anybody signs up for. And so that doesn't make it productive. It's not there for the growth. And so that's one of the reasons. The other thing that's happening is that the way the conflict works, the way the fight works, is that it's there to show us what we're missing. And often what we're missing is something that's been hidden from us through the trauma. And so if we don't feel the emotions, then we're not actually healing the trauma. And so the fight doesn't get to the next level. So it's really important, if you're noticing when you're in a fight, oh, I am thinking I'm better than the other person. The question is, what am I not feeling? What do I need to feel right now? And by feeling that emotion, that's how you make the fight really productive. There's this thing, and you'll notice it. You're like, oh, I'm avoiding it during the fight. Like, yeah. And you kind of can see it out of the corner of your eye. And maybe you have that like thought, the one where it's like, oh, maybe, oh. And it's like, that's the thing. When you're in the fight, that's where you want to go, because that's where your healing is going to be. That's where the productivity is going to be. That's where you're both going to be able to find a solution that you couldn't see before. And without that, you're never going to get there. And by putting yourself above the other person, it just completely cuts off that possibility. Outside of the fight, there's a lot of benefit to not like putting yourself above somebody else. I think to me, when I used to do that, the thing I couldn't see when I was putting myself above people, Tara, or anybody, was that I was creating separation. Like, it prevented me from actually being seen. It prevented me from having the connection that I wanted. It prevented me from being in full contact with life, being in full contact with Tara. It was basically a protective move. And whenever we do anything that's protective, like thinking that we're better than somebody else, we're also pushing them away. We're saying, So even if we are saying, hey, I want you, we're also pushing away at the same time. And when we do that, we never actually feel fulfilled. We never, can't think of anybody who's walking around going, I'm better than everybody, and I feel deeply fulfilled. It just doesn't happen. There's always, with the I'm feeling better than you, there is always an underlying shame of I'm not good enough. They go hand in hand. And you can work on I'm not good enough, but you can also work on the I'm better. And both of them, they balance each other out. So when you get to the place of not thinking like, oh, I'm better than everybody or anybody or a person, as that happens, the shame also erodes at the same pace. Tara and I were in a therapist's office like earlier in our relationship, and the therapist tells us this story about how one of his clients wakes up in the middle of the night, goes to the bathroom, and starts to pee and misses the toilet, and notice that his head says, fuck, she must have moved the toilet. Like, and it's funny because we have all done something like that, where we're like, we've entrained ourselves in a relationship where if something doesn't feel right, something goes wrong, the other person must be responsible. And so that's how corrosive blame is in a relationship. And so there's this great saying that I love, which is, at the beginning of the path, you blame somebody else. In the middle of the path, you blame yourself. And at the end of the path, you don't blame anybody. And that's a really critical part, because usually what happens is if somebody stops blaming somebody else in a relationship, then they start blaming themselves. Or if they're blaming themselves, they're not blaming the other person. And all of that is just as corrosive. Blaming you or blaming me in a relationship, both of those things are corrosive. So the reason that blame doesn't work is because it's not true. Like, blame is not true. It's like the same concept of trying to figure out like what's exactly fair in a marriage. There's just no way to find it. So am I going to blame you, or am I going to blame your parents because of the way they raised you? Or am I going to blame your grandparents because of the way that they raised your parents? Am I going to blame the blood sugar that you have? Is it the way that like your day went at work? Like, what am I blaming? Is it your boss's fault? Who am I blaming for this thing, right? So there's this idea that we have that if we find blame, then we don't have to be responsible. That's the logical side. But what's actually happening there is what we're saying is we don't want to feel the shame. So if I blame you, I cannot feel the shame. But that never works in a relationship. And that's why blame is corrosive. So I blame you, but I will feel even a little bit of shame for blaming you. We never walk away from blaming somebody and go, I feel great. It's their fault. Right? Like, we're not, yeah, we're good. It's like, it doesn't have it's like, see, it's your fault. But look at me. I'm not happy. That hasn't like relieved me of the shame. So that's why the blame doesn't work, is because like, it doesn't actually make you feel like you want to fix anything if I blamed you. It's like, that's not motivating, right? Hey, you're the one to blame. You're right. I'm fucked up. It's not like, oh, wow, yeah, we could fix this thing. Let's do that together. Or yeah, I could fix this thing and I'll be happier. No, it's I'm bad. So if I blame you, I don't feel better and I haven't motivated you to fix anything. So like, what does it do? All it does is it just passes shame back and forth. Moreover, if I go and blame you, if I'm like, okay, and you're wrong and you accept it, eventually you're going to be tired of being fucking wrong all the time. You're going to be like, I don't want to fucking be wrong all the time. And so either you're going to be passive aggressive and start attacking me under the table, or you're going to like throw that shame back at me eventually. And then I'm going to be blamed, and on it goes. It's like, you've never seen someone say, you know what? We got in this massive fight. I blamed the other person enough, and now it's all resolved. Like, that shit has like never happened. So blame is just, it doesn't work. But there's something in our mind that says, yeah, but somebody's wrong. And I question that. I question that. Like, if you need somebody to be wrong in a relationship, so then you're married to or dating somebody who's wrong, is that a turn on? No, we're just all humans and we're all doing things. And sometimes what we do is a match. Sometimes what we do is not a match. And everything is a symptom of something else. So we often are told like they were like the worst case scenario. Let's just take the worst case scenario, which is she cheated on me. Like, that's an easy one. I blame you for cheating on me. But yeah, the relationship was cold, almost guaranteed before the cheating happened. Or she compulsively cheats because of daddy issues. And I got involved in that for some reason, some way I was attracted into that relationship. And so like, well, is it really her fault? What was I accepting from the beginning? How did I remove my love so that she needed to go to somebody else? Right. And if I do find out everything that's wrong with the other person, then I haven't fixed myself. Right. Which means I'm still going to be attracted to the next woman who's going to, right. I have to look at what my role and responsibility in it. And if I'm blaming someone else, I can't do that. If I'm blaming myself, I can't do that either. Because if I'm blaming myself, then I'm being hard on myself, and I can't objectively look at it in a shame-free way where I want to actually improve it. So if I'm in a relationship and I'm saying, I screwed up, I did it wrong, like this is all my fault in this relationship, one thing I'm doing is I'm abdicating any kind of accountability for the other person. So that's going to be like, I'm basically telling them they're weak, they're not accountable, I'm better than them because I'm responsible for everything, and they're just like along for the ride as if they're not, like, they don't have agency, they're not their own human being. That's demeaning. But the other thing that's happening is that I am just doing that so I don't have to feel something underneath. So I don't actually have to feel the thing that's underneath the blame, which is where my healing happens. My healing doesn't happen by saying, I'm bad, I'm fucked up, I need to improve. Because I can tell you, every addict out there right now who knows they're an addict is telling themselves that, and it's not changing shit. I know that you right now, if I said to you, tell me about the 5 things that you wanted to have changed in the last decade that haven't changed, every single one of those things would be shit that you shame yourself for, that you blame yourself for, that you say you're bad for. So it doesn't heal anything because it prevents you from feeling the emotion underneath, which is that feeling that you have to feel and move through to get through the trauma. That's why blame is just corrosive as hell to a relationship. And it's blaming you, blaming the other person. That's all has to be let go. And the way to let that blame go is just like, it's just really simple, is to see that it's not real. It's like, they're at fault, or is it their parents that are at fault, or is it their grandparents, or is it society, or is it societal norms, or is it Beyonce who taught you that you needed to have a ring on it? Like, who the fuck is to blame for this thing? Like, it doesn't resolve anything. The question is, how are you going to move forward? The question is focusing, how do we want to be together? What's our shared vision? Blame, it's an elusive, it's like perfection. It's different for fucking everybody. Anybody can have their point of view. The question is, are we able to be together? How do we want to be together? How do we want to love each other? And how do we get there? That moves you forward. Looking in the past and seeing who the fuck was wrong, just corrosive. Typically what happens in a fight is that we're passing shame back and forth. No, I'm not bad, you're bad. No, I'm not bad, you're bad, right? And so the first thing that requires is for you to think that somebody's bad, right? If you can get over the idea that somebody's bad, anybody's bad, then the fight just falls apart. But the other thing that can also make that fight just fall apart is the idea that you don't have to defend yourself. Because the way the fight typically works is, I feel attacked, so I'm going to defend myself. My defense makes you feel attacked, so I'm going to defend myself. This defense makes you feel attacked, and so you have to defend yourself, and back and forth it goes. So it's like, no, that's not what I said. You said this. Right? That's not what I said. Or I said that because, I said that you were ugly only because you asked me, like, how ugly am I? So I was like, well, you're about this ugly. So I had no choice, right? And so I'm sitting there saying, like, I'm not wrong. Like, understand me, see me. But you're hearing, wait, you just called me ugly again, right? Like, and so it's like this back and forth thing that happens and you listen to yourself in the next fight that you have and just go, oh, wait, can what I'm saying that I think is defending myself be seen as an attack? Because that's what I see in couples that are fighting all the time. Each of them wants to be seen, and in their attempt to be seen, they're defending themselves. And that defense seems like an attack to the other person. And so both people feel like they're defending themselves and both people feel attacked. And so you can either stop seeing that there's someone wrong, so there's no shame to go back and forth in this shame hot potato, or you can realize, oh, there's nothing to defend. If you can drop that experience right now, just for a short period of time, and says, I don't need to be seen. at this moment. I can be seen in an hour. But in this moment, I don't need to be seen. I don't need to defend anything. I can just actually listen and find out what their reality is and see that truth, allow that truth to be there, not as like the ultimate truth, but just as a truth of, right, this is where they are. I can hear them. I can understand them. When they feel heard, then oftentimes they're at that point wanting to see you. And so that's when you don't need to, like if you hold on tightly to trying to be seen, you're going to push being seen away. And so that's how that fight works. Almost every fight. And it doesn't even matter if this is a fight between a man and a wife, or like NATO and Russia, right? Like, it's like, it happens. Like both people feel like they're defending themselves on some level for some reason. And both people feel the other person's defense is an attack. And it just goes back and forth. There's also the secondary benefit of not needing to be seen. It's because what it requires is you to actually see yourself. So in a fight, if you see yourself as bad, or you see the fact that you could be bad, then there's always going to be something to defend. So the more that you learn not to defend yourself, the more you can start to notice your inherent goodness. You start to become immune to shame, because when you see people shame you, it's like, oh, you can just see they don't want to feel bad about themselves or don't want to feel out of control. And so if somebody else can't see you and you recognize that, like they're not capable of seeing me right now, the only option for you to get to peace is to see yourself. Oh yeah, here I am, and I actually love this person, and I'm not trying to hurt anybody, and I can listen to them, and I want to be here with them. And I'm not going to take abuse. I'm going to draw my boundaries, whatever it is. But you can just see that inherent goodness in you, in yourself. But as long as you're defending yourself, you can't see it. Nobody walks away from a fight feeling like, oh, wow, I feel great about myself. But if a fight starts and you go, oh, I've done nothing wrong, and you can see yourself clearly and listen to the other person, you actually walk away feeling great being in a fight. So I think Tara and I hadn't quite gotten married yet. I remember going over to her parents' house, and it was like a crazy ass yell fest. It was like out of control. I was like, oh, apparently her family's like mine. It was just yelling a lot. When Tara and I got married, we just followed the pattern, and we had this great therapist who I am forever thankful for. I would say one of my greatest teachers. And she said, she's like, you're emotionally abusing each other. Both Tara and I were like, no, we're not. We're just yelling. It's just yelling. I remember it's like, no, we're not, like, like, no, that's not abuse. Like, abuse is something like when you're whacking somebody on the head with a cast iron skillet or something. And she's like, no, I want you to read this stuff. And, she talked to us, but her definition, which has stuck with me forever, is emotional abuse is when you are using your emotion to try to control somebody. Now, the one that our society says is the worst is anger, right? Yelling at me so that I do the thing, so that, and the abusive person who's yelling or screaming or even hitting, like that aggressive thing, that's what we say is bad. But it's just as true using guilt to try to control somebody is emotional abuse. Or using your sadness. Look how hurt I am. See how bad you are. Or using your fear. Like, like, take care of me, take on my fear for me. Anytime when you're putting the emotion at the person and you want to control them and try to have them take care of you or do what you want, bend them to your will through your emotions, that's abuse. And so that's one of the things that in a fight, you absolutely can't do in a way that makes the fight productive. Now you can do it. You can go out of the room and you can yell and you can scream and you can get sad and guilty. And it doesn't matter. Like, you can get angry and sad and scared in a fight too. That's all fine. It just can't be at the other person. It can't be trying to control them, and it can't make them feel unsafe. And if it doesn't do any of that, fine, great. All the emotions are fine. We love emotions. But if you're using it to control somebody, or if they feel controlled by the emotion, then it becomes incredibly unproductive because it's abuse. It's like yelling at one another, or it's like guilting one another. It's basically saying, I am going to control you. I'm going to oppress you with this emotion. Now, people have different ways of doing it. And like one of my favorite that is like very like not seen almost at all is the person who's like the weak person, who's like, oh, you said something critical to me and now I'm broken down and I'm sad and I'm not going to get up for 2 weeks and I can't love you anymore. And I'm being big about it, but this can happen in very small ways. That's just as much emotional abuse as someone yelling at someone as a way to scare them, to get them to change. So it's really important that in a fight, when you're having a fight with somebody, that you're not using your emotions to control them. In fact, that you're not trying to control them in any way, that you are trying to see them, that you are trying to understand where they are. You're trying to allow yourself to be seen when they're ready to see you, that you are finding a way that both of you can come together and have a solution that works for both of you, not control. Because the thing is, like, if you control somebody to do something, eventually that breaks. There's this way that we talked about venture capital, which I always loved, which is you have to make a lot of deals in venture capital, big deals and small deals. And we would say the amount of energy it took to make the deal is the amount of energy you have to use to maintain it. So if a deal kind of happened like gently and like it all happened and fell into place, those deals usually went really, really well. If it was a deal where it was like there was big struggles and you had to negotiate this thing and then you didn't quite see eye to eye and everything was a little, and you're shoving it into place, you have to maintain that to make that deal successful. And it wasn't 100% true, but it was true a lot. Similarly, if you have to control and cajole and like push somebody into doing something so that you can be happy, you're going to have to maintain that pressure to keep them in that spot. It doesn't freaking work. Finding what their truth is, finding where they want to move and finding how that aligns with you, that's a much easier way to get to a place where you're together and at peace. And so it doesn't even work to try to control anybody for any kind of length of time. And it's why you see relationships where somebody dominates through control. Those aren't happy relationships, whether it's controlling through big emotion, sadness, or big emotion, anger, or by withholding love. All of that, none of it leads to a happy relationship. It just never works. One of the biggest tricks for fighting well is just making some agreements before you fight. And that doesn't mean like, oh, we're about to get in a fight now. How are we going to do this? That doesn't work, because by the time you're getting in a fight, your nervous system is already riled. So this is about like sometime when you're not fighting, sit down and say, how do we want to fight together? And I remember Tara and I, one day we were seeing some friends in Colorado and they got in a fight. And they gave us a couple examples. The first one was they didn't hide their fight from us. They weren't going to go into the shame. They weren't going to say fighting was shameful. And they could do that because they weren't abusing each other, right? They weren't trying to control each other. They were just having a conflict. And so that was like quite a lovely thing to see in itself. But the secondary thing was at some point in the fight, somebody said, wow, what was it exactly? It was like somebody said, oh yeah, hey, we agreed not to do that. We agreed not to use that word. And the other one was like, oh yeah, sorry. And then they continued with the conflict. And I was like, what the, Tara and I looked at each other like, what the fuck just happened? Like, that's not how you fight. And so we asked them about it after their fight ended, which was like in a relatively short period of time. And I said, what the hell was that? And they're like, oh, we have an agreement. We have our agreements on how we fight. And they literally had a piece of paper, which Tara and I never have done. And that would probably be a good idea to have them written down, because I think we forget them often. They said even at one point, and then Tara and I experimented with this. They said at one point our agreement was that whenever we got in a fight, we get naked. So like if we're going to fight, we're going to be completely unclothed and be completely vulnerable. And they said it totally changed the way they fought. And it changed the way Tara and I fought too. And we don't do it to this day. They stopped doing it. But like you can literally have agreements of like the words that you're not going to say, and you're not going to make threats. You're not going to threaten divorce. And to have those agreements. And the thing that I'll say about it is that if you do that, don't expect to live up to all of the agreements on your first fight, right? But also don't make it an excuse not to, it's our first fight, so I haven't. You really want to try to maintain the agreements, and you don't want to have a fight over the fact that you didn't maintain the agreements. So it's really important to be able to say, that's not our agreement, and be able to stop and say, okay, yeah, that's true. We agreed to this. And it's also important that those agreements are actually something that are creative and make you both feel good and that you both actually agree to. So it's not like a cajoling, like, okay, so this is how we're going to fight, right? Good. Like, it's literally like, oh, when you do this, I can say this. And so Tara and I have many of those things. Like, so for instance, if I feel like in a rush and that's creating conflict, she knows, like, our rules are, she just says, I see how much you care. And it totally just makes me go soft, because I'm in a rush because of the way that I was raised, not because of what the fuck is going on right now, right? It's my trauma. It's not the real thing. And she knows that one thing that she's just acknowledging my care can totally disintegrate that rush for me and disintegrate my like urge to try to control her to speed up. So it can be many kinds of agreements, like sentences that you say when somebody is in their trauma, or the agreement of, if somebody says, hey, I'm in my trauma, then you go over and you just touch them. Or when somebody's sad, one of our agreements is like, when somebody's crying, we don't try to stop them. We don't try to fix it. We just be with them in their tears. You know, or if somebody's angry and you feel like it's abuse, you say, hey, I need that to stop. Can you please go into a different room? And then you go into a different room and get angry and come back. Like, there's all sorts of agreements you can have, and they have to be yours. They have to be something not prescribed by me, but something that you and your partner sit down with and say, how do we want to fight? How do we want to be with each other? And your first set of agreements are not going to be great. You're going to learn some shit, then you're going to have another set of agreements. You're going to have another. So to go back to that set of agreements over and over again and say, this is how we want to fight together. This is how we want to have our conflict, because we're speaking our truth, because we're growing, because we're changing as human beings. We're going to have these fights, and this is how we want to do it so that they're most productive, so that we can get to growth quicker, so that we can love each other better. These are our agreements, and it's just so good to have them. You're not alone in this idea that when you pull away from the fight, that your partner is like, can't have it, you know, chases you or doesn't allow it to happen, or like completely falls apart. As a matter of fact, like in the relationship with Tara, especially at the beginning, that was the case for me. Every time she was like, oh, I just need a moment for this to take a break, I would, like, my whole system would like freak the fuck out. I'd be like, what the hell is going on here? And I would totally lose myself. And I didn't understand it. So the reason that this works is because one person is usually like the chaser, and one person is usually like the, okay, and they're more like the love remover, right? So one's like chasing the love and one's like removing the love typically. So for the person who's the chaser, it is like death, internal death to like be abandoned. And so oftentimes the person who's the abandoner, it's like death to be chased. Like, oh, just like, give me a fucking break. Give me a moment. Like, leave me alone for a second. I need to find myself. And so both of them feel that way. They feel like a little bit of death for the person, especially if it's like a big trauma in their life. No matter what you're doing, when you're leaving a fight, it's really important to do it in connection. So when you're leaving a fight, to say, hey, I need a break. I want to start again in 10 minutes. Is really, and it's a precise time, like, hey, I'm not leaving you. I'm just taking a minute for myself. I'm going to come back in 10 minutes and we're going to continue the conversation. Is a huge thing as compared to, well, fine, fuck it, I'm going to bed. Right? That's a very different thing than saying, hey, I want to resolve this and I need a moment, right? Because that one feels like the removal of love, and one feels like, oh, they just need some space and they can come back. So how you leave a fight is incredibly important, because what you need is to feel like, hey, we're still connected. We're just having some conflict. That's the most productive way to leave a fight. If you need to calm your nervous system, if you need to just have a moment to think for yourself, whatever it is, or just you notice that you're about to get angry at somebody and you don't want to get angry at them because you don't want to control them, so you need to go out of the room for a moment. And so the important piece is like how that fight is left. I remember in this time where I was the angry person in the relationship with Tara. I was the aggressively angry person. She was the passively angry person, right? Everybody's angry. And every time I would yell, she'd be like, I'm out of here. And it was like this death for me. And when we started to learn like, hey, I want to pull out of my anger at, so this actually gives me a break to get composed. And she would be able to say, hey, I'll be back in 10 minutes. I'm right here with you. All of a sudden, these breaks became like really great ways to have a fight. It wasn't a death anymore. And she could do it with an open heart. And it was like, hey, I'm okay with you being angry. I just don't want you to be angry at me. I just need a break so that I can be in myself. I'll be back in 5 minutes. All of a sudden, our fights completely changed. All of a sudden, there was just so much more safety for everybody. She could feel safe because she didn't have to feel like she was being yelled at. I could feel safe because I wasn't going to get abandoned. And that like level of safety and trust allowed for the conflict to just be so much more civil, so much more loving, so much more open-hearted, and yet still have the conflict that we needed so that we could take our relationship to the next level. So Tara and I used to live partially in the city and partially on these 200 acres. And there was this moment where she's sitting in her Miata, revving her engine, threatening to run me over. And I am sitting above it with a pitchfork, which was the closest thing, threatening to hit the hood of her car. Like, that's how bad our fights got at the beginning. And it was brutal. I never physically hit her, right? And she never physically hit me, but it was like those fights were brutal. And something that we realize is that there's certain things in fighting, and I think everybody knows this, but I think it's important to say it, which is there's certain things in fighting that take a long time to heal. If you do in a fight, it's going to take a long time to heal. The threat of any kind of physical violence is going to take a long time to heal. Any kind of physical violence, like the nervous system, our nervous system, even if our minds say, oh, I know that they were just, our nervous system is like, oh, that's real. And we're going to be like this around them every time they get angry. And then their anger can't be okay. And then we can't heal through that anger. Yelling, insults is another, like insulting somebody that can have the same kind of big emotional like hit, and that it erodes trust over a long period of time. Generally threatening somebody with future stuff. I'm going to divorce you. I'm going to cheat on you. Any of those big threats are going to be incredibly damaging, and it's going to take a long time to heal out of those. And so the thing about a fight is if you go past a certain limit, it's going to actually be traumatizing instead of healing the trauma. So you can have a disagreement that heals the trauma. You can have a disagreement that re-traumatizes. And those fights, if you're threatening, if you're any kind of physical violence, if you're making threats in the future, if you are insulting, anything like that, you're going to be re-traumatizing. And so holding the boundary of saying like, we're not doing that in a fight, or if you're doing that, I'm going to leave. I'll be back in 20 minutes, or I'll be back when you call me and tell me you're ready to do this without threatening me, without insulting me. Holding that boundary is incredibly important, or you're going to start going in the wrong direction. It's going to get re-traumatizing instead of healing of the trauma that the fight is eliciting in you. And so that's like a critical piece. And when Tara and I made those agreements, and we talked about agreements, and I highly recommend putting these things in the agreements, that was like the first and most important step in turning our fights into something that became healing, that became evolutionary for us, that became transformative, that helped us become better people, is just like making it a safe playing field. And so that is absolutely critical. Boundaries for me was always something that was scary. It was something that like I was intruding on somebody, telling somebody else what to do. And I was like controlling somebody. That's what boundaries were subconsciously in my head. And I realized at that moment, no, boundaries are an act of love, and they are an act of taking care of yourself, and they're not telling other people what to do. And fighting requires great boundaries. You have to have great boundaries to have good, productive fights. And so the rules that I have with boundary are easy. There's two of them. One of them is, as soon as you draw the boundary, no matter what the response is, it needs to make you feel more love for the other person. So boundaries aren't like a defensive no. It's going to open my heart. It's going to allow me to feel more free. It's going to actually acknowledge my freedom, and I can love you better. And the second thing is going to not tell the other person what they need to do. It's going to be telling them what you're going to do under certain circumstances. It's, when you do X, I'm going to do Y. And the why isn't going to be, I am going to do something that hurts you. It is, or I'm going to do something that controls you. It's, I am going to go and take care of myself. So when you're guilt tripping me, I'm going to leave. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Or if you're guilt tripping me, I'm going to leave. And as soon as you call me and tell me that we can have a conversation without guilt, I'm happy to come back. And so if you follow those two rules, it makes your heart open no matter what their response is going to be. And that's an important part, is no matter what their response is going to be. Because what happens when you draw a boundary is you go, I'm going to draw this boundary, and you get scared of the response. Because if you have to draw a boundary as a new thing, if it's a new boundary that you're drawing, it's automatically true that you do not feel okay drawing the boundary. You think that maybe you shouldn't draw this boundary. Like, maybe you should just put up with it. Maybe you should put up with the gaslighting. Maybe you should put up with the guilt. I can't say no to my mom guilt tripping me. I can't say no to my mom criticizing. I can't say no to somebody yelling at me. And so if you're going to draw the boundary, you're going to get really defensive. You're going to be like ready for the fight, which invites the fight. Like, if I draw a boundary with you and I'm like, if you get angry at me, I'm going to leave. That is going to invite a fight, where it's like, I don't want to be with your anger, so I'm happy to leave when you get angry, and I'm happy to come back as soon as you're ready to have the conversation without yelling at me. So it's going to be a whole different interaction if you can draw it with that open heart. So it's really critical that whatever boundary you draw, it opens your heart, and that you're not telling the other person what to do, because then you're in a control game with them. And instead, you're saying, this is what I'm going to do, because I have agency, I have my own empowerment, and I'm free, I can do the thing that I want to do. And so that's the critical piece of the boundary. As far as that other piece that I think is really important, is that the boundary drawing isn't really for the other person. It's for you. So for instance, you're at a job, and you have to say to your boss, like, no, you don't yell at me, but there's somebody else that the boss never yells at. It's like, what's going on there? Why is it that the thing that the boss does to you, they're not doing to everybody? It's because in that person's mind, it's very clear that, like, no, I'm not going to get yelled at by the boss. Maybe the boss yelled at them one point and said, hey, don't do that. Or maybe the boss yelled at them at one point and they were like, wow, it looks like you're feeling way out of control on this one. And the boss was like, oh. But the boss is yelling at you because there's something in you that thinks that it's okay. Because as soon as you know, like, oh, I'm not going to put up with that kind of behavior, then there's nothing in you that has to like fight or defend. And it's less likely for that behavior to come at you. So the boundary is mostly about you learning for yourself that something's not okay. And you're drawing it externally is learning that in a real concrete way. It's like learning how to like fix an engine. You need to get your hands dirty. Learning how to draw boundaries and what's actually the right boundary for you, you're going to have to get your hands dirty. And so it's really important to see boundaries not really even about them. It's really all about you learning what works for you and being okay saying like, hey, I am okay. If you need to pull your love away from me because I'm going to take care of myself, then that's what's going to need to be the case. And that opens up your life to people who are ready to treat you in the way that you actually want to be treated. Our oldest daughter was raised in such a way where we always allowed her to have her emotions. But somewhere she was like 17 years old. I was having an off day and she was having a hard time and she was like going through it. And I was like trying to give her advice to like make her feel better. And she was like, Dad, just let me have my emotions. I was like, oh, fuck. And I realized like that is the cause of so much tension in almost every relationship that I see. Is that, especially not every relationship as far as like business relationships, but in every relationship as far as lovers relationship. And usually what happens is somebody feels like they're responsible for the other person's emotions. And that could be as simple as like, I'm trying to make her happy and she's not happy. And it could be, I'm trying to make sure he doesn't get mad and he's mad. It's like, we're not emotionally responsible for one another. We can't be. And everybody says, whenever I say that, they say to me, but I can make her happy. Like I brought her flowers and she became happy. And it's like, yeah, but the next day, would she be happy if you brought her flowers every day? Can you like consistently make her happy like that? So I'm not saying like, don't care for the person. Don't do things that like feel good to you and allow them to feel good if that's where they're at. But if you're trying to do things to make them feel certain things, it's like manipulative. That's not love. That's right. It's like, oh, I want to give something to you like flowers because I thought of you and I think it's a wonderful thing and it's great. But it's like, if I'm trying to constantly make you happy and chase your happiness or chase making sure that you're not scared or chase making sure that you're not angry, or that is just nothing but a disaster for relationships. And the way that it works is I am going to try to make sure that you don't get angry, which means I'm showing you that I'm scared of your anger, which means you feel more alone, which means you're going to get angry at me because every time you feel really alone, you get angry. Or it means I am going to try to make sure that you don't feel scared, and then you're going to like it for a little while maybe, and then it's going to feel like I'm caretaking you, like I'm treating you like a little kid because like, oh, you need to be taken care of, like, oh, it's going to be okay, like, and then all of a sudden you're resentful all the time because you're saying, wait, I can fucking take care of myself. Or let's say you try to make me happy all the time, and then I start going, oh, like you need me to be happy, and then I remove my love, which makes you feel like you've failed, which makes you chase me some more. So it's so critical in a relationship to just allow the other person to have their emotions, right? Do things that are kind, be compassionate, be gentle, be loving, all that good stuff. But be yourself and allow the chips to fall where they may. Let the person be angry. Let the person be scared. Let the person be sad. Let the person be happy. Let the person be excited. So what I've noticed is every emotion that I have a hard time sitting with Tara or with my kids is an emotion that I wasn't allowed to sit with as a kid that I don't like sitting with. So what I found out is what I'm actually doing is I am trying to make them feel a certain way so I don't have to feel a certain way. It's even more manipulative than I thought it was. I thought it was at the beginning, like I'm trying to help this person. And then it was, oh, I am trying to make them feel good for me. So I don't have to feel a certain way. So I can continue to be neurotic around my emotions. And you can see this. You go into an airplane and a kid starts to cry and you stand up and you look at the airplane and everybody who's freaking frustrated, they were the ones that weren't allowed to cry as kids. It's just like, it's as simple as that. And so it's also just deeply disempowering to try to take somebody's emotion away from them. There's this saying that says, never take the bottom away from an addict. They need that bottom to get to healing. It's very similar, like never take an emotion away from somebody. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. It's how we make decisions. And to take that away from them is to make them into a child. It breeds resentment in a relationship. And then eventually it'll just kill the sex in the relationship. The reason it kills the sex is because you want to have sex with equals. You don't want to have sex with someone you're caretaking. That's not how it's meant to be between a romantic couple. It's not a caretaking relationship. It is a supportive, interdependent relationship. And so as soon as that happens, then the sex will start to die as well. So it's really important just allowing each other to have the emotions, not try to fix it, just be with them. One of my daughters came home from school and she was just ready for a fight. It was like whatever I said, she was hearing as criticism. Whatever, I would do, I'm like, here, give me a hug. Oh, you're trying to control me. It was like anything was just like ready for a fight. And we had realized like, oh, they just like need this emotional release. So like something overwhelmed them. And we would say, okay. And then we would draw some boundary. No, I'm not going to stop telling you that we got to do the dishes. And then I'll have this big meltdown. They yell, scream. And then they would be back in connection and they'd be like, oh, actually what happened at school today, I got made fun of. Someone called me like the redheaded goose or whatever and blah, blah, blah. And I remember hanging out with Tara one day and I just noticed everything I said, she contradicted. And it was like more subtle, obviously, than like an 8-year-old, but it was like everything I said. I was like, oh yeah, this thing, well, why did you do it that way? That doesn't seem like, and then why did you do it? It was just like one criticism after another, which is very unlike Tara. And I would even I even tested it. I was like, oh, I'm going to contradict myself and I'm going to agree with her. And I did. I agreed with her. And then she was like, no, why would you ever do that? And so I was like, oh, this is the same thing. She has this big pent up emotional experience that she needs to get out. And this is the safe place. She knows that if she's going to be angry here, she's still going to get loved. Like I'm still going to be here for her the next day. This is the safe place to have that emotional release. And then I started realizing one day, like I was doing the same thing. I came home and I had a shitty day and I was like, I'm contradicting everything Tara says. I'm like, I'm looking for that fight. And I think almost all of us have been there with somebody where we're like, oh, this is like, I'm not getting out of this fight. Like, oh shit, here it comes. There's like no way for me to get out of the fight. So what's happening there is really important because what's happening is that we have this big emotional experience and we are looking for a way to get it out and we're going for the safe place. Like some people use sports for that, for instance. I'm going to go watch my sports team so I can get this big emotion out. Similarly, some people will do that in a relationship. Not everybody, but some people will do it in the relationship. And it sounds like that's what's happening in your relationship. So the important thing is to realize, oh, I'm not feeling internally connected with myself and I am starting a fight to do that. Or they are, oh, they're not feeling connected. And so instead of going to let's have a fight, go to what do we need to be connected? Because a fight can be very corrosive when it's like that because it's not about the other person. So now I'm yelling at you, but it's really not about you at all. Like that, like how that can't be good. The fight isn't about the thing that's in the relationship. It's about the fact that your boss yelled at you or something like that. And so to be able to start recognizing, oh, this feeling, this sensation, this somatic experience that I'm having right now, that's how I feel when I'm looking for a fight. And what do I really need? What do I really need? A cuddle? Do I really need to go into another room and just fucking yell for a while and then come back? You don't have to yell at anybody to get the emotional release, right? That's the weird thing about humanity. I mean, I remember this moment of like, somebody's like, oh, anger is good. And I'm like, how can anger be good? I'm like, every time I get angry, somebody gets hurt. And they're like, well, why are you getting angry at anybody? Right? Like somehow or another, our mind is like, we have to repress our anger or we have to get angry at somebody instead of like just go into a room and get angry. And I highly recommend if you see a fight where this is happening, say, hey, let's just go and yell in other rooms and then come back together so that you don't have to actually have this like false emotional outlet at somebody to discover what the real thing is happening for you. Instead, just go and have the emotional outlet without hurting each other. Get the yelling, get the crying, get whatever needs to happen that's not at each other. And then come back and then have the discussion, whatever that discussion is. And it works wonders. It's such an easy thing to do. Say, oh, it looks like we want to get in a fight. Let's just go yell and then we'll come back. It's just a simple thing. And then you're not taking your emotion out on somebody else. You're just getting your emotions out and then you're solving the problem. It was amazing. Like one paragraph, like 3 minutes of talking and I was not getting it right every single time. And basically it's this tool where one person says something, just like a short thing to explain their side of the fight. And then you just repeat what you heard. And I got it wrong every time. I was like, what is happening? It's like, I know I hear that thing and I'm repeating it but she's like, no, that's not what I meant. And she would adjust. No, I meant this. I'd be like, okay. And then I would say it and she'd be like, yeah. And then she'd do the next paragraph. I'm like, okay, so you said this. She's like, no, I meant this. And it was like little nuances of, oh, like I was just putting the blame in this like odd place in the corner. Or I was saying that like, I was inferring that she was trying when it was something that she wasn't trying, and it was an amazing moment because I was like, oh, I don't really get what she's saying to me. So like to some degree we were like fighting over semantics, but it was a little bit more than semantics in the fact that it was her perspective. I wasn't seeing the perspective through the words. So we did this mirroring over and over again for like, I think it was like over a year every time we fought, just to like learn what each other was saying and how much of our disagreement was just not understanding the other person, where they were coming from, what they meant when they said X, Y, and Z compared to what you heard. And it was an amazing thing. And so how to listen has become a huge thing for me. And the most important thing is to listen to a person like they're right. Like the way I do it in a fight is I will listen to Tara and I will think like she is everything I admire, like the best guru of the biggest thing. And she's like everything that spills out of her mouth is a pearl of wisdom. And I'll listen to her like that. Like, oh, there's some truth here that I don't get, that I am here to understand. And it doesn't mean I have to buy it. But the idea is like, I'm here to fully to understand where she's coming from. And the other thing that I do when I'm listening is just be full wonder. Just like in the connection course, when we talk about wonder, I'm just like, it's like curiosity without needing to know the answer. And it's this space of like awe. Oh, wow, what is happening? I have no idea. I'm so curious, but I don't need to like I don't need to root around and get to the place where we solve everything. I just need to be in wonder and eventually it'll show itself. And so that's the way I do it. I listen to her like she's like this unbelievably intelligent, smart, amazing person, which she is. and then also listen to it like just with this huge amount of wonder. But it took me like a long time of just mirroring her to understand that how much I was not understanding of what she meant. And it went both ways. So she wasn't understanding me, and we just had different ways of looking at the world and different ways of communicating, and our trauma filtered things in different ways. And so it's so critical to learn how to listen. And I really suggest for you just doing that mirroring for a while and until you really understand like where you might be missing stuff. And the other thing that does, which is really cool, is when you realize, oh, they mean something different than what I'm hearing, and I'm putting my layers of interpretation on it, and they're putting their layers of interpretation on it, you start realizing like we might not be disagreeing. Like this isn't personal. Like this isn't them rejecting me. This is them not understanding me. Right? This isn't like they think I'm bad. This is they don't get where I'm coming from. They can't comprehend it. And it's really hard to be mad at ignorance. Not ignorance like you're ignorant, but ignorance like not understanding. It's really hard to be mad at not understanding. Really easy to be mad at you're attacking me. And so there's a way in which all of a sudden, when you're listening like this, when you start working on the issue, there's this woman I work with who's amazing. She's this technologist, and she talks about, she goes, it's like looking at the problem like it's a patient on the table. It's not personal. Like we just look at it like, oh, this is the problem. And then all of a sudden that's what happens. You're like, oh, we're just looking at this problem like it's a patient on the table. It's not personal. It doesn't mean anybody's bad. We can just listen to each other and like understand each other, and then everything's going to resolve itself. So learning to listen, critical. So I remember this one time with Tara. It was maybe like 4 years in the relationship, and she came home and she was pissed at me. I mean, she was doing some acting in LA, and she had a show, and I didn't come to the show. And she came in and was just like furious at me. And in my mind, I was like, oh, this is true for her. Like this is how she sees the world. It doesn't have to be mine. It's hers. And so I could just be there and like have an open heart and listen to her and hear her story. And with the recognition, like, this is like important to her, this is true for her, this is real. And I could just have this massive amount of compassion. So I just listened, I was just there, and I was just understanding, and I could say I'm sorry, and I said I was sorry, and it just all melted inside of like 10 minutes. What used to be hours of fighting, like maybe even a day of fighting. Because what would happen is that she would tell me her story, and I would think, this has to be true or not true. And if it was true, then I did something wrong. And if it was not true, then she did something wrong because she's yelling at me. Right? And so then I was in this world where one of us had to do something wrong. And the trick was, all I have to actually do is just see that this is actually what's important to her, that this is the way she sees the world. And that's not wrong or right. It's just that truth. That's hers. And so when I learned that, it changed everything. And then we both learned it. And it just changed everything in our relationship. Because all of a sudden, it wasn't about trying to figure out, we weren't adjudicating life anymore. We used to have this phrase, and it was like, hey, let's not go into the courtroom. Courtroom was to figure out who had done what and what the truth was. It's no, there's just this is the way you see reality. This is the way I see reality. And how do we want to see reality together? How do we want to be together? Even if you continue to see it this way and I continue to see it that way, right? And so there was things in our relationship that we would just agree, this is the way I see it. This is the way you see it. But what we never did was we never said, and because we see it that way, then you have to be this way or I have to be that way. Because it was really important. What we never really wanted to do was to compromise in that way where we had to be something besides ourselves to be loved by one another. If you're looking for what the truth is instead of trying to understand the other person's truth and what their reality is, then you miss each other. There's no connection there. Nobody has ever said, once I find the truth of this relationship, then the relationship will be happy. That's not how it works. But everybody says, I would love to be seen. I would love to be understood. I would love to be connected with as I am. And so finding the truth doesn't help the relationship. Finding the other person's truth, understanding it. It doesn't mean you compromise yourself. It doesn't mean that you change your actions. It's just saying, I understand you. I get how that's the case. And then they can immediately do the same for you if they want to. And what I notice is that when two people are in a fight, this is such a critical thing. Two people in a fight, what both want is to be seen. Both of them want to feel seen. And what they're usually doing is they're just throwing shame at each other. They're like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And what they're saying is, I want to be seen, I want to be seen, I want to be seen. If you want to end a fight, just sit down and see their truth. Connect with where they're at. To do that, you can't take the blame. And the way you do that is to say, this is their story. I'm here to understand them. I'm not here to see if I'm wrong or if they're wrong. If I'm bad, they're bad. The truth and how we're going to adjudicate the truth. It's just, I want to see them and fully understand where they're at. That's the first step. And as soon as someone feels seen, almost immediately they want to see the other person. And so the fight just almost instantaneously resolves. So many of my fights with Tara was because I was just not attuned to the thing that she wanted in that moment. And so, and vice versa. And so we came up with this idea of hey, right now you're processing something. Do you just want to be listened to? Do you want some questions or do you want advice? It was a simple question. And I'll go into that in a second, but it speaks to this broader thing of what is it that the person actually wants right now from you? So we usually react to something from a complete programming. When somebody comes with a problem, we go and solve the problem. When somebody says, I'm hungry, we cook. Or when somebody says, I'm hungry, we say, well, fucking food's in the fridge. Whatever. But we have a program that we run when somebody comes to us with X, Y, or Z. but it's not particularly always what the person who's coming to us wants generally. And so many fights happen because somebody is basically thinking that somebody wants something when they don't want it. As a matter of fact, I see this like in such a broad way, where so many times I see, particularly husbands, but not always, particularly husbands are constantly trying to help their wife solve a problem, which makes the wife feel undermined and belittled, like, I don't need your fucking help. And then they get resentful, and this whole thing like and then like years of this goes on, and then the wife feels like belittled and disempowered, and the husband is like, wait, I do everything I can to make her happy, and she's still not happy. Like, ugh. And it's all because of this little thing, which is like, she doesn't want your help. She just wants to be heard. Or she wants you to show her, not do it for her, or whatever it is. Like, and vice versa. This happens often. Like, the man will also be like, hey, I just want a little fucking help. And she's like saying, yeah, it's really hard when your boss does that. Like, no, I want you to like give me some advice. So it works both ways. And so it's just really important to ask, just be really intentional and say, what is it that you want? And that's what Tara and I would do, is like when a discussion would happen and I would like have some response and I would see she get a little cranky at me, I would be like, okay, wait. What do you want? Do you want me to just listen? Do you want me to give you some advice? You want some questions? And then she would do the same thing. And we had this particular thing around that where we realized that what we almost never wanted was the other person to coach us or to be our psychiatrist. It's like, no, we want each other to be with each other. Like, I just want you to be with me. I don't want you to try to fix me. And today we'll occasionally say, oh, I'd really like some coaching. And it'll happen like once every 2 months or something like that. But it's like we really found a very clear boundary with ourselves that like, oh, we don't really want that. We'd rather just have somebody with us, listening to us, maybe sometimes helping us solve a problem or asking really good questions, but never like in that mode of trying to fix. And so that was a big eye opener, but it all started with this very simple thing, which was, do you want me to just listen? Do you want questions? Do you want advice? And one of the coolest things was at the beginning, the listening was like so hard. I'm like, all right, I got advice. There's this like video on YouTube with like this woman with a nail in the head. And she's like, I just want to talk about having a nail in the head. He's like, can I just remove the nail in the head? She's like, no, this is just painful. And that's how I felt. I felt so freaking frustrated. I was like, ah! And now it's like, oh, this is so easy. Like, I don't have to do shit. I can just sit there and be loving and listen to her, and she will sort out the whole thing herself. Like, she'll just talk, and then all of a sudden she'll know what the fuck to do, and then the whole thing will be resolved. And it's like this lovely thing. And I used to think I had to do so much. I had this feeling of like, I'm responsible for her happipiness. And now it's like, oh no, like I can just be with her. It's just that easy. And it's so much nicer of a relationship. So the deal is that it's sometimes very hard to find out who's having the emotion when you're like deeply empathetic, right? So I call empathy, it's like being with somebody without being in somebody. But oftentimes we find ourselves in somebody. So the classic example of this is that I had this CEO that I was working with, and super logical, and would just make these like really, really great arguments. And I would just buy into these arguments that they were making. And then one day I'm like, wait a second, that shit didn't make any sense. That shit didn't make any sense at all. And so I started doing the research, and I found out actually that people who are highly logical, very, very thoughtful people often are more logically inconsistent than people who aren't highly intellectual, and they have less of a capacity to see it. And I was like, wow, that's really strange, because they have a harder time emotionally feeling the inconsistency, is my theory. And so anyways, what was happening is they were very convicted to the thought. They really, really, really believed it. And I was empathizing, and I was like, yeah, I also feel your conviction. Yes, you must be right. And so I wasn't listening. And now I can see this all the time. I can see these very emphatic, very logical people making, and like watch news, you can see it, making these completely irrational, but everybody's buying in because they're empathetically, they bought in, they're in the other person. And so this happens in lots of different ways. For instance, somebody can be really anxious, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, I wasn't nervous about that 10 minutes ago, and now I'm really nervous about that. And so in a relationship, this can be incredibly challenging, as you're finding out right now. Like, it can be incredibly challenging because you don't know where you begin and they end. Like, are they sad or are you sad? Like, what's actually happening here? So there's a great trick on this, which is just putting 10% of your attention, 20% of your attention in your body. As soon as you can feel your own system, so not all of your attention is in them, but you're attuning to yourself, then you can attune to them in a real way. When you're fully in them, you bought into their story, you've bought into their emotional experience, you're feeling their story, you're feeling the emotional experience. But if you attune to yourself, and then you can see them for what's actually going on. Oh, they're really convinced of this. Oh, they're illogical in this. Oh, they're really sad. And then you can actually be with them. You don't have to be in them. And the weird thing is that what I notice is that when people are bought into the story, like you see this all the time where like friends are saying, oh, he's such an asshole. And I was like, yeah, he's such an asshole. And they all kind of like nod. And then they walk away from the conversation. They might feel a little better for a little while, but like 10 of those conversations later, they all feel like shit all the time after these conversations. We've all had the friend that's like, I don't even want to go over to the friend's house because they're just going to bitch about the boyfriend again. It's like the same old routine story. Whereas if you're actually with them, oh, I see that you really think that they're an asshole. Oh, what's going on? Like, and being curious about that instead of buying into the story, then there's a lot more room for the transformation, which is what fighting is all about. Fighting is all about figuring out how you can transform together. And if you're in the person, it's very hard to see yourself. It's very hard to have any kind of transformation. So the other thing that happens is that oftentimes, as we talked about, you have this relationship, and usually one person's more logical. They feel like they're more right. And the other person is more emotional and they're more empathetic. That's a standard, not always, but it's a standard dynamic. And so that's how that works to some degree, is that the empathetic person is like, oh, they feel like they're right and I'm feeling them, so they must be right. Right? And so that's like part of the thing that makes it all so convoluted. So just putting some attention in yourself allows you to be in your own system. And this also helps you like calm your nervous system down when you're in the fight. Putting a little attention in yourself separates you from them in a way that allows you to actually be with them, and it calms your nervous system. So it's just like a really cool hack, especially for the empathetic people like you. I remember when we were doing the facilitation, there would always be somebody who would be passive aggressive. When we started, we were doing these 24-person things like live in San Francisco, and there was always somebody who somehow or another felt like they were being oppressed by the situation, as if they couldn't leave, and they would start being really passive aggressive. And our rule of thumb was, when we'd say it at the beginning, once we figured it out, we'd say, like, if we see someone being passive aggressive, we're going to ask you to be just outright aggressive and like just yell and get mad at us and tell us your boundaries or whatever it was. And that was our rule of thumb, because it was such a hard thing to like sort out. And one of the reasons we found out it was such a hard thing is because a lot of times people who are being passive aggressive don't know they're being passive aggressive. So a great example of passive aggression is guilt, right? Like, guilting somebody is such a passive aggression thing. Like, you want them to change, you're trying to get them to change, you're using an emotion to get them to change. It's an aggressive act, but you get to play the victim while you're guilting, right? You're like, oh, poor me. And it's such a hard thing. And now, granted, there are some people, and I remember watching this film where all these moms, it was like a documentary sort of thing. All these moms were talking around and bragging how good of guilt trippers they were. They're like, I'm the best guilt tripper. Like, this is how I do it. This is the tone. I know. And that's what I did. I was like, fucking gross. And I was like, wait, they know they're doing this? They're doing this and they know? Like, and the truth is that sometimes they know they're not, but sometimes they don't. It's like sometimes very hard for people to see that they're being passive aggressive because their identity is so entrenched in I'm the one that's oppressed or I'm the victim that they can't see that they're But the truth about us as people is that nobody likes to be told what to do. We all resist. It's just how openly we resist, right? And we know this because, like, the voice in the head, if you have a critical voice in the head, and the critical voice in the head is like, you should do and it gets really shitty at you, notice the reaction is usually some form of passive aggressive because you haven't done everything the voice in the head has told you to do. You're like, yeah, meh, fuck off, I'm not doing that. Or, yeah, you're right, I should do that, but really, fuck off, I'm not doing that. And so that's what happens when somebody feels oppressed, they're going to move into passive aggression if they don't feel safe enough to be completely aggressive and just say, no, I'm not doing that, or draw the boundary. The way to think about passive aggression, so it's like easy to see, it's like if somebody is doing something subconsciously or not subconsciously to change you in a passive way, that's passive aggression, right? So it's being mean while pretending to be nice. It is guilt tripping. It is nagging is a form of passive aggression. It's anything where the person feels like they don't have control, but they're still exerting control. And when you see that, it's okay to draw the same boundary that you would if somebody's yelling at you or being completely aggressive, which is, hey, I'm not going to do that. And I remember with my parents, my poor parents, some point I called them up and I was like, they were just constantly criticizing me. It was a form of passive aggression. And I said, hey, I love you. I like coming home, but every time I come home, you criticize me. And I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that with anybody else in the world. Nobody else in the world would I be like, sign me up to go over to their house and be criticized for fucking 30 minutes or 2 hours or for a half a day. I'm just not doing it. So I love you. I want to come over to your house, but I'm not going to do that until you can agree to stop criticizing me when I come over. They didn't call me for like 18 months. I think it was like 18 months. There was like silence. And then they were like, okay, we miss you enough. I guess they didn't say it that way, but they were like, okay. And then like the criticism pretty much stopped in the family. And so it's the same thing as if like I came home, my dad yelled at me all the time. I would say, hey, I'd love to see you, but it's not okay for you to yell at me, which I did at a different time in my relationship with my dad. So it's drawing that boundary. And if you are the one that realizes you're being passive aggressive, like you have resentment, then the thing to do is to move that anger, to like let the anger go, to express it, not at the person, not in an abusive way, but to just fully express that anger and then draw the boundary that you need to draw, instead of feeling like you can't draw the boundary and you can't move the anger, which is that lack of empowerment, that lack of sovereignty, that lack of agency is the thing that makes somebody passive aggressive. They don't feel like they can actually get what they want, and so they have to do it in a backhanded way. Okay, we had a fridge breakdown, and I was just like, I'm gonna get it done. I'm gonna buy this fridge, because it's like, we need a fridge. So I just went out, bought the fridge, got the fridge, and it was not the fridge that Tara wanted. And Tara wanted like a silent fridge, and she wanted to do the research, and I was just like, argh. And maybe once a week for the first 6 months, I heard about the problems with the fridge. Oh, I can't sleep because the fridge is so fucking loud. Like, it was just like this undercurrent in our life about the fridge. It was like the fridge could do no right in the house. Like there was like it didn't matter if it kept the food cold. It was still a shitty fridge. And there was this, it was resentment. It was this underlying resentment. And in Tara's mind at the time, I remember I'd be like, can you please stop like beating me up over the fridge? And she's like, I'm not beating you up. I'm like, I'm not like thinking you're wrong about it. I'm thinking that I'm wrong about it. Like, And it was this very confusing thing because there's a time in our relationship where it was very clear anything like that would be my fault. But it became this thing where it was still in her mind and she didn't want to blame me for it, but it was just there and it was like, And what we realized was that she was just really angry about the fridge. And because she hadn't fully gotten to express that anger, it just showed up as this resentment. And the earlier form of resentment in the early part of our relationship would have just been blame. It would have been blah, blah, blah. But there was still this kind of resentment. It was almost like she resented herself for not standing up and saying, no, Joe, don't buy the goddamn fridge. I have a very specific fridge I want, and we're going to buy that fridge or whatever it was. And we started to realize that like, oh, whenever resentment was there in the relationship, that there was an anger, there was some sort of frustration, that resentment was kind of a sign of a repressed anger that was happening. And oftentimes the person doesn't feel safe, showing that anger because I went out and I bought the damn fridge and I did all this work and like, well, I'm going to be ungrateful for him for taking care of the fridge or, and then I'm going to get angry at him. And I've mentioned it many times and he's already angry about it. And like, it's just going to blow up. And so the way that resentment typically works is that one person is taking care of another person in some way that they don't want to be taken care of, i.e. the fridge. And then the person starts resenting them, right? Like, hey, don't make me small. Don't disempower me. Don't make my decisions for me. Don't think that you have to save me all the time. And then that resentment starts happening and it builds and it builds. And then it typically will become passive aggressive, behavior, which we can talk about later. And that's the resentment that's there. And what's actually happening is that there's an anger. There's like, hey, and the anger it is anger, but the anger is pointing at a boundary. So it's anger, da, 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 da. I'm like, don't fucking take care of me, whatever it is. Don't buy the goddamn fridge until you talk to me or whatever. But underneath that anger is a boundary, right? This is how I want to interact with you. The important thing to know is that that's really the thing that's happening under resentment is one person's caretaking somebody and the other person's getting resentful. And a couple ways to know that this is happening in your relationship. One is that you get in fights over little things that like aren't at all like relevant. If you notice you don't want to come home or you're bummed about when they're coming home, then the resentment is fully gotten in the relationship. And so what that means when fighting is that oftentimes whatever you're fighting about is going to be like saturated by this resentment, meaning that you're actually fighting about two things at the same time. We're having a fight over the fact that like my career and your career don't match and how are we going to do that? And we're also fighting about the fact that you never clean the fucking coffee maker. It's going to complicate every fight that you're in. And it's going to make the fights harder and harder to get to a resolution where you both feel like you've evolved, you both feel like you've changed and grown. And so it's really important to address those resentments. And the best way to do that is the person who's holding the resentment is to move some anger, draw some boundaries, and get that. Because oftentimes the resentment lingers because the boundary hasn't been drawn, right? Like if you can draw the boundary, then why do you have to hold on to it? Because you're okay for the future. It's the fact that you don't feel like you can draw that boundary that makes it so that you have to hold on to this resentment. I'm hanging out with my mom. My dad's supposed to meet us at dinner. He was like 5 minutes late, which he seldom was. And my mom was like, I think, full panic attack. That's how I was raised with time. So you can imagine I have like some trauma with time. One day we were doing a Groundbreakers. We were doing like our week-long program. And I said, I need help with this. When I'm in this trauma, I need to hear something that pulls me out of the trauma. I think it was Janine who came up with the expression, I see how much you care. And it just dissolved my rush. Because that's what it was all about as a kid, right? Like it attuned to my trauma in this very particular way that was like, I see you. I see that you care, that you're trying. And it was that not being seen in that all the rush was about. I was rushing so that I could be seen in that, and I was never getting seen in that. And that's what happens when we're in fights. When we're in fights like this, it's we are in our trauma, and we're not being seen the way we weren't being seen as a kid. And now we're making it really hard to be seen. Like I was making it really hard to be seen that I was in my drama when I'm freaking out and rushing the kids and honking the horn and like, come on, we're late for the party or whatever the hell. Like all anyone can see is that I'm being a dick, right? So like it was really hard for anyone to see it. And that's the same, like just boom, that just all of a sudden did this thing to me. Like, oh, I see how much you care. And it just dissolved it. And so when you're in a fight, it's really important to, especially in those agreements we talked about, how do you look at the kind of those repeating trauma patterns and how do you attune to each other? If I start crying, what's the attuned response? Is it to just be next to me? Is it to have a thing on my knee? Is it to say, I'm right here with you? What is the thing that you actually want? And it'll take many iterations to find the thing that like actually like gets you, but you can find that thing. So as you're getting in fights with your partner and you start seeing these repeating patterns, it's really important to sit down and have those conversations. Say, I notice every time, let me see if I can find another one that happened with us. Right. It's like, when you don't feel heard, I notice that when you don't feel heard, you just continue to argue the point like forever. And even if I'm saying, hey, I hear you, and this is what you said, if you still like, you're in your trauma, this isn't about what's actually happening in this moment. You're just like in this thing. What's the thing that I can say to you? And I remember this one, Tara was just like, I just need to hear I'm right. You're right. You're absolutely 100% right. Like, yep, you're right. And boy, I had a problem with that one at first. I was like, you're right. But I realized like, oh, that it's not about being right or not being right. What it's about is that she's in her trauma. And when she was a kid, she was always made wrong. And she just needed to be told, oh, hey, I'm right. Or, oh, if you're feeling scared, you don't need me to fix you. You just need to be physically held. You just need to be like embraced in a strong way. So you're looking for what are the trauma patterns that you get in. We all know we get in them in a relationship. It's those repeated fights. And it's like, what is that attuned response? And you can try to guess at your partner's response, like the attuned response. And you can be attuned, but trauma is weird because you're being attuned to something that's actually not happening right now. It's happening in the past, like we discussed. So it's really important to like sit down with your partner and like talk about like what is it, what do you most want in that moment? In that moment when you're fucking like feeling like that you're all alone in the relationship and I don't get you, like what is it that you want me to say? What's the thing that you want most that you never got as a kid? Like what is that? And you learning what that is and to be able to give it to them. You can't give it to them if it feels like shit to you, right? Like I couldn't say you were right for a while until I got it into my bones what it was actually. But it's really important that you can do that if you're capable of it and if you want to, and if you're not, to figure out what it is in you that makes it so you don't want to support them in that way. But if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. But if you can do that, it's really important to have that very attuned response to that repeating trauma that's happening in the fights. You know that classic sitcom moment where like there's like the tough guy and he's trying to say I'm sorry and he's like you know, like that moment. Like I was that guy. I was like, the idea of apology was absolutely something that I was never gonna do unless it was like one of the most hardcore cases. And I remember a therapist that we were seeing was like, oh no, like apologies should be all the time. Like say, I'm sorry. Like literally, I'm sorry that you didn't understand what I was saying to you. Like, I was like, wait, but that's not my fault. And she's like, what does fault have to do with an apology? And I remember like, what? Like, I remember that. And how it finally landed with me was that I thought apologies were just something that was there to make you feel ashamed, right? Because as a kid, what I got taught was say you're sorry, right? It wasn't like there was an authentic apology coming out of my system. It was you're supposed to say you're sorry whenever you do something that I don't like. Like basically, it's like that's someplace you should be ashamed, so you should say sorry. And so I had to learn all over again, especially in fights. I had to learn how to apologize in an upright way, not in a shame way. Because at this point in my journey, I realized that like anytime I felt shame, it was a stagnant emotion, right? Which is why fights stagnate. The shame is keeping that pattern in place over and over again. And so I was like, I'm not doing shame. And for me to realize like, oh, there's such a thing as a shame-free apology. And I think we have a podcast on shame-free apologies if you ever want to listen to it, because you can go deep on this. But the idea is that when you do an apology, it's an upright apology, meaning you're not making yourself small, you're not making yourself ashamed. And you're doing it in such a way that you're saying, oh, this is genuinely what I don't want to do. I don't want to yell at you like this. I don't want to guilt trip you. I don't want to threaten you or whatever. It's like, and so I'm very sorry for doing that. That's not how I want to be with you. That is what, instead of like, I'm sorry that I did that thing and I won't do it again. Like that's like a very demeaning thing. And it also is going to be shameful. And so you're going to repeat it. Whenever I see apology like that, I'm like, that behavior is happening again, right? And you see it all the time, like in the abusive relationships. I'm sorry, it wasn't me. I'm not going to do it. Like they feel so ashamed. You know that shit's going to happen again. And the reverse of the apology is really cool too, is that if you make an upright apology and you say, hey, I'm sorry for doing this. This isn't how I want to be with you. It reduces the chances of that behavior happening again. It's an amazing thing. It's like one of the most powerful tools I know for changing behavior is to apologize in an upright way for the behavior that you've done. So apologies are this great way to heal from a fight. It's a great way to say this behavior isn't going to happen as much or at all anymore. But it's also a great way to respect somebody else, to say like, hey, I respect you enough to say and to hold myself into account without shame. Now, there's another kind of apology that there's a lot of therapists that really like this. We experimented with it for a while, Tara and I. I do like it. We don't use it as much anymore, but it was really useful for a while, which is the apology of, hey, I'm sorry that you're feeling disconnected right now, or I'm sorry that you've had a hard day, or I'm sorry. And it's not a sorry like I'm responsible sorry, but it's saying, hey, I acknowledge you're having a bad day. It's not what I want for you. Hey, the car fucking went fucked and I'm sorry, that's not what I want for you. Like, it's just saying, hey, I'm right here with you. And it's such a sweet thing to do. It's like such a sweetness of saying like, I acknowledge that kind of sucked and I'm right here with you. And so it allows the relationship to show that it's like, I'm with you, and I also acknowledge that that's yours. It's not for me to take care of. I can just be here with you in it instead of like come in and try to fix the whole thing and then disempower you. And so both of those apologies are really nice. Use them for as much as you want, but that upright apology, like I look forward to. I can't wait to find a place where I can apologize, because I know how transformative that apology is for me and how healing that apology can be. But it just can't have that shame. If it has the shame, it's just going to stagnate that pattern in place. So it's always in this very upright place where you're like taking into account and you're being completely in your own agency when it comes to apologies.